What's that?
I realized I left my.
Okay. We're going to have Bill has notified us that he's going to be a few minutes late, so we're going to go ahead and start the meeting without him. We obviously will offer him the opportunity to have input on anything that he missed without being here. We have sort of an unusual schedule this evening. There's 4 pieces of legislation. Rather than have everyone speak about all of the legislation at the beginning, I think it would be more productive to offer an opportunity to speak on the legislation that's upcoming in front of each piece of legislation. So what I'm going to do once the meeting is called to order, we're going to start. I'll read the ordinance that we're going to discuss, request input, and then after the community input, we'll have discussion as a committee and then move on. So with that, I'll call this meeting of the Community Improvement Committee to order. Jody, is there anything we have to do before we start with legislation? Great. So I'm going to invite comment right now on Ordinance 9139. That is the ordinance amending and adopting Section 70.40 C1G, C2, and C4 of the codified ordinance of the city regarding inoperable vehicles. Is there anybody who wishes to speak about the ordinance regarding inoperable vehicles? Excellent. Ahead of the meeting, I was somewhat concerned. There's some changes. There's currently the city shall cause the notice to be published in a newspaper of general circulation once each week for 2 consecutive weeks ahead of any action on an inoperable vehicle. It appears this legislation would remove that requirement. I think that's reasonable. I think there's plenty of methods of notifying a person that their inoperable vehicle is problematic. However, there is, in C4, in the absence of a request for a hearing or compliance, so that request for a hearing is being removed. I was concerned that there would be no appeals process. But I think that Hunter has explained to me that that is not the case. Could you talk to us a little bit about the current appeals process in the absence of this language?
Sure. So currently in this ordinance under C4, it is a little awkward and, in my opinion, antiquated. As you mentioned, it allows for a person who's charged under this ordinance to request a hearing with the city attorney, me. In my experience, we've never done this, and this is problematic for 2 reasons. Number one, first off, this ordinance makes inoperable vehicles a crime, which it already is under Ohio Code as well as BG Code. So if you're charging someone under BG Code with this ordinance, then they get summons to court and they can request a hearing with the city attorney, then that puts me in the position of being a witness in their case, which is a very weird thing that no defense attorney would ever tell their client to do. And the other problem is this ordinance is wrapped into our civil offense system. So you could theoretically cite someone civilly for this instead of as a crime, which is great. The problem is this ordinance has certain requirements, like you said, the notice in the paper, the hearing with myself if requested. And the question is, do those requirements happen if they're cited civilly as well? And I don't know the answer to that question, and my hunch is that we are in violation of our own ordinance by having these requirements in this statute. So the amendment getting rid of these would clean up the statute, remove the legal awkwardness that's in there. Now, as far as the appeal that you mentioned, if they're cited criminally, of course, they have due process as is allowed and required by law. If they're cited as part of the civil system, they still have the right to a hearing, as anyone does cited in any way under our civil penalty system, which is easy to look up, and it's always been that way. So they still have the ability to have a hearing.
Great. Real world, who makes these citations right now?
We have a civil citation officer. He goes around and I'm sorry, are you talking civil citations?
Please explain both processes right now.
Well, sure.
Since this puts an owner of an inoperable vehicle at risk under both situations.
Well, to be clear, they've always been at risk. I mean, this inoperable vehicles has been a crime under both Ohio code and BG code for many, many years. This simply changes, like I said, the legal weirdness that's been in our code that we've never actually done. As far as the difference between the two systems, we have a criminal law system, which the state has and the federal government has and the city has, which we've always had. And if you get cited under that system, you go to municipal court like you would for any other crime. Many of our minor crimes are also tied into our civil penalty system, which is you get what's essentially a civil fine, which the fine raises over time if you don't address it. And while you're going through that process, and it's a short process, but while that's pending, you can request a hearing, and you have a hearing out at the municipal court.
Yeah, so I guess my question was specifically who issues these citations. Do the police issue the criminal ones, and our code enforcement officer enter the civil ones?
So yes to both. We have a code enforcement officer who is a former or current police officer. He's not on regular policing duties anymore. He's kind of retired from that, but he acts as our code enforcement officer. So he's the person who cites people civilly, but he is an officer of Bowling Green Police Division.
Excellent, thank you. Jeff, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate the explanation on the notice requirement or the publication requirement in particular. I think that's a very antiquated way to provide notice to somebody. I don't know of anybody that is receiving notice of this type of thing in the newspaper anymore, so happy to see us get rid of it and avoid the unnecessary costs of publishing.
If I could just add real quick, the thing about the hearing with the city attorney, I just can't stress enough how very strange in the law that is. I've never seen that in any other place ever. I don't, to my knowledge, know that we have any other laws here that do that, and it would be an extremely awkward position to put me in both professionally and privately. So,
excellent, thank you. I guess I will call for a vote of support for this and send it back to the council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Next, we will be addressing the Ordinance 9140, ordinance amending and adopting Section 99.20A of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green concerning noxious weeds, duty to cut. So currently, the city can notify you if your grass is above 8 inches in height or if you have noxious weeds that are going to seed. If you do not address it within 5 days, is that correct? Then the city can hire lawn service and mow your grass without your permission, charging you $150 an hour, I believe, is the rate. So this amendment would, instead of issuing a warning each time, you would get a warning only for the first offense in any season, and then further offenses would be, the city would just enter your property and mow your lawn. Would anybody like to speak on this issue? Great. Yeah, please come to the podium.
I just have a question. It's not just lawn, right? It's also weeds. So
Correct. Any
it's not
weeds that are
just-
going to seed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Noxious weeds as identified in Ohio Agricultural Code, I believe. Jeff, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we've all had several people reach out about this ordinance in particular. I don't know that I have any questions. I do understand that there are good arguments on both sides of the issue, but I don't think no questions for Hunter or any of the administrative staff.
All right. I'm concerned that it's very aggressive. I think entering a person's property after one notice per calendar season is fairly intrusive. What is the compelling reason for removing the process of warning each time that we're about to enter somebody's property?
So this is something that the Planning and Zoning Department has been asking for and worried about for years now. Essentially, there are repeat offenders in town who would prefer to allow the city to be their lawn maintenance service. Now, we've always had the statute that says, hey, if you don't cut your grass, we can notice you and go in. But the amendment, again, to be clear, is just to allow for only one notice in a calendar year. And the reason for that is because historically it's been kind of a barrier to action on the planning and zoning departments, and because there's just so many properties to keep track of. And when did we send the last notice? And has it been 5 days? And now it's time to go out there again. And now they mowed it this time, but they're not going to next time, kind of thing. It's a lot of work for the planning and zoning department, especially for the few repeat offenders that we have. So the theory was that we would help them out with this by allowing for just one notice per calendar year.
Why would we not impose a fine?
Well, it essentially
Instead of like, how many of these properties that we enter are occupied?
I can't speak to that, but my inclination is most, if not all. We most notoriously just had to do this over on Wallace recently, and it's a pain for everyone involved. It's a pain for the officer who has to go put the notice up. It's a pain for us to find someone to go cut it and make sure the timing's right and all that. They do get a fine essentially via assessing the cost to the tax duplicate. But the problem with that is that, yes, it's a fine, but it's essentially a lien, right? So that money is not realized for a very long time, if ever. So it comes at a high cost to the city. And without this amendment, which requires us to put a notice every time, it kind of puts us into the situation that we have been in of babysitting these repeat offenders, and it drives certain people here in the building nuts.
I guess, why would we not assess an actual fine? We're spending, I acknowledge that we have this process. I'm deeply concerned about the ability to enter somebody's property without notification each time. I'm sympathetic to the cost to the city. Why would this not be a civil offense?
It is.
So why is there not like a fine schedule attached to it?
Well, there is. For example, the house I just used on Wallace, that person got cited twice. They still didn't mow their lawn. Now, eventually they get cited enough, sure, they'll do it. But in the meantime, the city's receiving complaints about how terrible their neighbor's house looks. So yes, they do get a fine, but that's not always the impetus to action that you think it would be.
Are we, when we issue those fines for subsequent offenses, are they, does the fine increase each time we have to go out there?
Doesn't some some yes and some no. Some have enhancement clauses, so it can go up, but most are the same amount. It's just each day could be a subsequent offense. So this is a particularly unique one because we have that 5-day notice thing. So each time we're trying to track when a person got noticed and that kind of thing. It also puts us in the weird position. The civil offense system is also kind of a strange one to enforce legally and collect the fines on. Because at the end of the day, if a person doesn't pay on it, we either have to ask for a warrant for their arrest, or we have to take them to some sort of collections agency, or take them to small claims over a civil citation system that we've already gone through. Those are 3 long processes that can be painful on both sides and ultimately not really realize the fine amount. We prefer to use that civil citation system when we can because the other alternative is to go the crime route, and that's not something you want to do. But like I said, sometimes people just don't want to mow.
If I may, at a recent meeting, somebody brought up the idea of liability for damage to equipment when the city has to come in and do lawn mowing. I mean, I guess so. You see any issues with that? I mean, we're going in unannounced, and I think the example that was, maybe a dog chain or something is in the yard, and we run that through a mower. That's going to cause significant damage. The homeowner, had they known the lawn was going to be mowed, probably would have picked that up. Obviously, if we are just showing up with no notice to them, is there any concern that we're going to run into that kind of thing, literally?
Well, they do get noticed the first time,
But
and
so if I get notice in May though, and then, August, October, I don't mow my lawn again.
Sure. I understand that, and I understand your concern. My suggestion would be that it is unlikely that you would get a notice in May, months would go by, and then the city would just enter your property and mow it again. My hunch is that you'd probably, if that much time went by, we have enough reasonable people here that you'd get a notice each time. This is more intended for people who just flat out refuse to respond. As far as the liability thing goes, we already do enter people's property, sometimes without any response from them. And we have insurance, the city has insurance, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else on this one.
What's that?
I don't think I have anything else on this one.
I'm opposed to I'm opposed to a change that would allow us to enter without notification. If I would be amenable to a 1-day notification for the second or further offenses, but I believe in policies rather than people, and if we have a policy that allows us to enter a property without notification, I'm opposed to that. So I intend to vote against this.
Okay, well, we might want to wait for Bill for a tiebreaker on this one. I think probably some amendments to this might be warranted. Ultimately, I think it is a policy that's got merit.
Excellent. Well, Bill, you're just in time. We are discussing the duty to cut. and the proposed change that it would allow notification once per season.
Right.
So currently, I am unsatisfied with this ordinance, and I'm opposed to a policy that would allow us to effectively enter someone's property without notification.
That's all you guys did in 20 minutes?
No, we're
Yeah,
doing
we-
what?
We've been waiting for you to cast the tie-breaking vote. I think that this is probably that, especially in the examples that Hunter provided, that the city should have. I also recognize, though, one person reached out and said that they've been at the hospital with their kid for the last 2 weeks and couldn't tell you how tall the grass has gotten in that time. I believe that probably the city would not be citing that person, and if they did cite that person, the minute they got the call saying, this is what's been going on, we'd figure out a way to drop that and, make sure that the lawn was getting mowed as soon as possible. I guess I would rather err on the side of having the tool in case we need it, and with the understanding that if it does start to get abused or we see more examples like that, we can always scale it back fairly easily.
Could I briefly add something? I'm sorry. I know it's your meeting. Every time one of these happens, we don't just send an officer out on a whim or anything like that. We have meetings once a month about all of these issues, and we go over each property individually. So this decision is never made unilaterally. It's made by a meeting of lots of people here, and the decision each time to send out someone to mow is a group decision. And, if we had information that someone's in the hospital, that's, of course, we wouldn't be citing someone and doing that kind of stuff. So I only mention all this because, again, this isn't just something we do on a whim or without consideration for the circumstances.
I acknowledge that, but what's happening in May is different than what's happening in August, and this would allow a notification in May and mowing whenever after that. 5 days after the notification, May 1st, there's no time for them to address the issue. There's no time for them to make a case that maybe everything was fine in May and they got in the hospital in July. So to me, this seems like, I acknowledge it would be easier for us, but at the same time, somebody's property is their property. And what we're really talking about is grass. So I don't think it's that big a deal to issue a notification each time that we're doing it.
First of all, I apologize to everyone for being late. Please do not see it as a sign of disrespect. I was teaching. I teach at the University of Findlay, and this is the last week of classes, and I had a class that went until, the point where I was going to be late, and I did not want to let the students down. So I do sincerely, though, apologize. And I acknowledge also that I'm sure there was a lot of discussion that I wish I would have been either a part of or heard. So my statement has the caveat that something may have been covered already that I don't know about, or the point would be not that great of an idea. So usually I don't make that caveat, although there probably are a few occasions where I should. In listening to and in studying this, it's not like I'm coming in your cold. In studying this, it seems to be like so many things that we encounter, room for a middle ground. And in acknowledging that there are situations where the decision isn't made alone, and there is a need to perhaps streamline things, because as each time the the extensive procedure is followed, that introduces more days where the noxious weeds are not cut. So I acknowledge that, but I also acknowledge what Joel has said, that we should be very careful in entering somebody's property. In light of all that, I would be interested in a slight change to this that would allow us to cut down on the instances where it would be, the notice wouldn't be given, but also would give some mechanism for the administration to see how it works. And that change would be where it says for the first offense, just change that to the first and second offense. And what that does is, of course, there's and I haven't seen the graph, but there's a group of people, I would imagine, that have only one offense, some that have exactly two, some that have three or more. And so it would move some of those in the exactly two category to still have the notification, but somebody that has had this happen 3 times in a year or more, they would have gotten notified the first 2 times, and then at that third time, have some sort of a bypassing of that procedure. So that's, I'm just throwing that out there as perhaps a talking point to see how the rest of the committee and the administration thinks of that as a compromise that allows us to have the advantage of both points of view.
Would you like to offer that as an amendment?
If you think that would be appropriate for this committee as opposed to the full council, I mean, if I offer it and it's seconded to recommend to council, I think that would be fine.
Yeah.
I move that we offer as a recommendation to council that we change for the first offense to read for the first and second offense.
I will second that for the sake of discussion. I do agree that there probably is a middle ground here between 1 calendar year and going out every time we need to police somebody's lawn. Would it be easier for the administration, and maybe you can't answer this question while we're sitting here, if we were to amend this, let's say from once per calendar year to once every 6 months or 90 days, if we were to adjust the time period, would that be easier to track, or would that be more difficult to track than the number of violations in a calendar year? I mean, my inclination would be if we go out more than once every 90 days and you're mowing the grass, once a week probably, if we're getting a decent amount of rain.
My guess is it would probably be a little more difficult. For what it's worth, I like Bill's suggestion. I think it's a reasonable one, and I think it is a nice middle ground. Legally, I don't know that that's my personal opinion. I don't know that that's relevant here, but I think that is a good suggestion for what it's worth.
Hunter, whenever your opinion is in conformance with what I said, it's perfectly appropriate.
Great.
Then, hearing no other amendments, I will, I guess amongst the three of us, I'll ask for a vote to suggest this amendment in full council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And with that, I guess a vote to forward it as amended to council.
One more item, and maybe we don't need to put this in the legislation. Are we mentioning in the final notice that there will not be subsequent notices? Right?
I believe
mean,
so.
Notice number 2 here, we say, hey, if we have to come back out here,
I believe so, and for what it's worth, we already give multiple notices. We don't just send one, wait 5 days, and then send an agency to go mow the lawn. This is something we notify people over and over and over, so.
I think what Jeff's saying is actually whether you're currently doing it or not, if we change this legislation, when they've used up their second time, if there would be something added to the letter saying, by the way, in better wording than this, but by the way, next time we're just going to come out. And again, you
Sure.
can work on the wording.
Right.
At $150 an hour.
Yeah, that's very reasonable, yes.
All right, all in favor of forwarding this as amended to City Council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. All right. I will ask for public comment now on ordinance 9141. This is the ordinance creating and adopting section 99.21 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green concerning managed natural landscape.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I'm speaking as the president of Bowling Green Save Our Neighborhoods Group. Our organization fully supports the development and inclusion of codifying regulations for managed natural landscapes in Bowling Green. It's an excellent way to improve stormwater management, improve water quality, and support our local biodiversity. A review of the ordinance, however, suggests to us that the language in the code is not strong enough or descriptive enough to provide home and business owners constructive guidance on how this best may be implemented. This in turn raises concern that the code might be implemented with good intentions, but result in a variety of well-attended but very messy and unruly landscaping across Bowling Green. We'd like to suggest that the ordinance be tabled until more specific language is developed to help guide community members in implementing these important practices and essential landscape management plans. So at this time, BG Song would like to suggest that a group be formed to look at the proposed ordinance with the purpose of making recommendations for changes to council. And if the group can get together and review options and make the proposed changes to council so that you have it in time to consider before the December 18th meeting, then that would be great. However, I don't know if that's enough time. So in that case, if more time may be needed for a group to go over options for managed natural landscape recommendations, that maybe the ordinance could be kept off the table until a council meeting in January. We think that there are excellent people within city staff that could be used, whose input could be very helpful in forming more solid recommendations for this ordinance, and those would include Cinda Stutzman, the naturalist with Winter Garden Park, Adrian Lowen-Curian, who of course is the arborist, and sustainability coordinator Amanda Gamby, and BG Song would very much like to have a member of our group since, I'm sorry, can you shut my phone off? It's in my pocket, I'm so sorry. So inviting a member of BG Song to participate in the group's discussions, as well as a city resident who is a member of Ohio Master Naturalists, perhaps inviting a person from BGSU Environmental Studies program, a faculty member and or a student. We would like to bring in comment from Oak Openings Wild Ones. Wild Ones is a national organization that promotes managed natural landscapes, and there are very expert people within our own region with the Oak Openings Group. Kathleen Dennis, who's part of Bowling Green Save Our Neighborhoods group, is personally familiar with the Tennessee Smart Yards program, so she can also provide input from that program to help further define the benefits of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
may I ask the city attorney a question?
of course.
Hunter, if this is tabled till December 18th, are we able to then retable it when it comes off the table automatically? Or is that not an option? Can you only table something to a date certain once?
I think you can retable it multiple times, right? I believe so. Yeah. Sorry, I'd have to get my rules of order book out, which is upstairs.
Okay.
You don't think we can?
I seem to recall it coming up once before.
Right. But can't that action be retabling? I'm sorry. I can't answer that right now. I'm sorry.
That's understandable, if that's something you could look up. And I do know that council has the ability to change its own rules, but it takes a supermajority, so maybe it would be something to, that we could do on that specific case. So
Yes.
can we do it now? And if we can't, can we make a motion to change it for that? So if you could look that up, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
I've looked this over. I'm pretty comfortable with most of what it says. I do note that when we're talking about noxious weeds, that Ohio has two different levels of noxious weeds. One is prohibited noxious weeds, and one is restricted noxious weeds. The prohibited level is the highest level of noxiousness, I guess. The restricted noxious weeds, you're allowed to have up to 2.5% of that seed in regular turf grass, and I think it would be unreasonable for us to expect a managed natural landscape to eliminate these weeds when it's being sold in turf grass.
What was the catalyst for this ordinance right now?
Thank you for asking. The whole point of this ordinance was Part D, the may not be planted in the right-of-way part. There's been somewhat of a growing demand for this kind of stuff nationally with issues like sustainability, that kind of thing. And the city wanted to recognize that. And I understand if you have issues with the language, I totally get all that. Again, the whole point of all of this was just for the city to be able to manage the right-of-way for safety reasons. So that was it.
Great. I would like to suggest adding the word prohibited in front of noxious weeds, so that A reads may include plants and grasses in excess of 8 inches in height and which may have gone to seed, but may not include any prohibited noxious weeds.
Prohibited.
I would just note at that point that, as you pointed out, the Ohio Revised Code is very specific about what a noxious weed is. So, we as the city can't say, well, we find this to be a noxious weed and that's not, that kind of thing. So, we're trying to be in line with what the ORC says as well.
I agree. There's just two levels of noxious weeds. There is restricted ones and there is prohibited ones. And I think the reason that they're restricted is because there's a tacit acknowledgement that they're
It's kind of hard to get
endemic.
some of the, yes.
Yeah, so I think having a city code that's more restrictive than what the state expects is somewhat challenging. So I guess I'll ask for a vote on adding the word prohibited in front of noxious weeds.
There hasn't been a second, and may I speak before this?
certainly.
Second? Thank you. First of all, Hunter, it looked like you were about to say, well, I don't want to get in the weeds on that, but you kept yourself from saying that, so that's good.
Thank you.
Joel, you had mentioned about the possibilities of there being some noxious weeds in regular turf grass.
Yes.
In section A, it says, but may not include any noxious weeds and must be maintained so as to not include unintended vegetation or turf grass. So if I'm reading this correctly, and maybe I'm not, you already can't have turf grass. So that wouldn't be an issue if somebody put turf grass in and oops, there was some weeds in with it.
I acknowledge that,
Okay.
but your neighbor has turf grass, and 2.5% of their turf grass is noxious weeds.
Okay, but if we use that reasoning, the neighbor has turf grass, so can they have turf grass in Part A?
No, all I'm saying is that if we include the entire list of noxious weeds that Ohio has, there is 2 levels of noxious
Right,
weeds.
I get that. And that's
So
in
if we're-
ORC.
Yeah, so if we're saying that managed natural landscape has a higher standard than regular landscape, that's problematic to me.
Okay. Hunter, would there be, and again, this, I don't think you're the one that goes out to check to see the type of grass, but do you foresee that there would be any kind of difficulty in distinguishing between the 2 classes of
I don't, only because it's already a pain to distinguish any of the noxious weeds at all, because we need like some sort of professional to do that anyway.
Okay.
So,
Do I have a second to add prohibited? All right. All in favor of forwarding this to the committee as written?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I had another question before.
Certainly.
Thank you. What about gardens? First of all, are gardens permitted now in, well, certainly in the right-of-way or front yards or whatever? And would this change that at all?
well, it depends on what you mean by garden.
Oh, okay, good question. Something that produces vegetation that is normally considered vegetables for eating.
A vegetable garden.
A vegetable garden, thank you.
We did have an email exchange about that issue prior to today. And as I said in the email, I suppose that there is an interpretation of this ordinance which would allow for a vegetable garden. And that's part of the sustainability thing that there's this national movement for. So the short answer is yes, I think this ordinance would allow for a vegetable garden. And again, the idea was we didn't have, tall plants, potatoes or whatever growing in the right of way, so you can't see around the corner. I don't know how tall potatoes grow. So
They're not tall.
okay, so
But okay, and I guess this gets to a secondary
I don't
issue.
have a garden. I'm sorry.
That's the only reason I know is my wife has a garden in the backyard, and she plants a lot of potatoes because hers are really good potatoes. Okay, so anyway, this sort of secondary issue on this is what does it do to a neighborhood when somebody has a garden, a vegetable garden, in the front yard? I'm just talking front yard or right away, as opposed to the backyard or perhaps even side yard. And I don't know as if that's something that, of course, it probably wasn't the motivation for the legislation, but is something that is worthy of discussion as to do we want as a community to have that as something that could be, your neighbor decides to put a 10 by 12 vegetable garden in their front yard. And it has to do with, as so much of this does, the trade-off between property rights and responsibility to the neighborhood. And so it sounds to me like they are allowed now or not. And
Not in the front yard is my understanding.
not in the
currently.
front yard?
Correct.
So this would allow it then?
Theoretically, yes. And you know, I think that's a fair point. Yes, it is kind of that balance of property rights versus what looks like crap kind of thing. That being said, you know, this is, like I said, this is in response to a push that we've had nationally, not even so much locally, I will admit that, but we kind of wanted to get ahead of it with the right-of-way thing. And all that being said, this is something that could always be done, and if it starts to ruin all the neighborhoods one year, you could repeal it the next. I don't know.
If you repeal it, somebody decides to put again, a vegetable garden in their front yard.
Yes.
They do so in the window where it's permitted, and then we decide later to make it not permitted.
Yes.
Would there be any kind of, well, first of all, it would be disruptive to the person that cultivated it,
It would.
and would they be grandfathered in
For that season.
for that season? Okay. Yeah, I don't know as if we're opening something that we really don't want to open. So maybe there should be, and I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee before I make any kind of motion, to prohibit vegetable gardens in the front yard, or however the wording would be for that.
I believe that gardens should be permitted as a right, so I would not support that amendment. But I do have one additional question before we take any final votes. But
I agree. The garden should be permitted as a right. So I'm pretty sure that they're already permitted in the front yard, but I'm not certain about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, and I don't mean to interrupt. I didn't have that code in front of me. I know we address it somewhere, but it's part of the new zoning code, so I'm less familiar with that.
I think probably, and this will probably be a good segue into the next ordinance, but keep in mind that I still have a question on this one. On the civil exterior property maintenance, you know, probably it would not be too hard if a garden got out of control to start considering that, you know, rubbish that is a breeding ground for insects, and we can get at it that way, correct?
Yes, but all that being said, you know, you always have to interpret laws like this and laws like that one in a way that is deferential to whoever's being cited, right? So you have to interpret it more on their side than on whoever's citing them. Just keep that in mind is what I would say.
The motivation for my bringing it up is there is a location in Bowling Green where there is a vegetable garden in the front yard. It's well kept. It's kept, you know, it's a good garden. It'd be a great garden in the backyard. But in the front yard, what it does is it kind of draws attention and changes the look of the series of houses. And it just, I don't know, it seems out of place. So while we're talking about it, and it's been in place since before we put the new zoning code in. So that's why I brought it up is I understand and respect the idea of people having the right to grow their own vegetables, and I embrace that. But in the front yard just seems it seems out of place. And so that's why I brought it up.
Do I hear a second?
What were we motioning on?
Your amendment to
Oh,
address
yeah, I never
gardens?
really made the motion, but
Okay.
do you have an opinion one way or the other, Joel?
Well, yeah, I believe people should have the right to grow food in their yard if they want.
Then, without using my toes and being able to count, I will not make the motion.
Excellent. Jeff, you had a further question.
Yeah, so would the administration, could we accomplish the same goal by amending D, say that managed natural landscapes may not be planted in the right of way so as to, I don't know how you want to word it, you know, present a challenge for safety purposes, I suppose.
My initial response, without thinking about it whatsoever, or having any time, let me say it, let me rephrase that, without having time to reflect on that question very much, would be, I wouldn't really want that, because then we'd be in the position of having to go around and inspect and regulate all the right-of-ways throughout town and measure and try to see if we can see around the corner at a stop sign and that kind of thing.
So vision on corners is the primary thing we're concerned with here. It's not, ambulance rolls up and can't get to the front door because of this huge, expanse of managed landscape in the front yard.
I suppose that's a concern now that you mentioned it.
Okay. Yeah, as you're walking around Fourth Ward in particular, there are some very nice managed natural landscapes in the right-of-way. And, I think probably this would be another case where we're not going to go around, probably could not go around telling them to rip it up, but I don't know that we want to.
Without it being a visual impairment and, looking terrible, I think it would be a very bad look for the city to go around having people rip that stuff up.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you're opposed to saying may not be planted in the right of way unless it looks good?
I would be opposed to that, yes. But my opposition doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I too, Jeff, I see that there's some that are very well done and some that aren't. And so
Yeah.
the question is, do we prohibit it entirely because of some abuses, or do we somehow change the wording so that there's some leeway, but not too much leeway? Because again, we have to balance the ability to enforce the law and the time that it would take to do so.
Yeah, I don't have language prepared right now to propose as an amendment, but I think that probably when we take the final vote on that, I'd want to add a more, or another objective standard, I guess. Can't impede vision or something like that. I think there's probably a middle ground. I don't have it right now, but I also think that finding a way to address this area of the code in a more comprehensive way, whether that's after we pass this or if we can table this again, I think either of those would be good options. So
Perhaps what we could do, Mr. Chair, is either have a motion that, we recommend this to council with the possibility of adjusting
Amendments.
Part D. I would support that, and that would give us some extra time to get with the administration and try and see if there's something we can do to have the balance between.
Well, I think we can offer amendments directly. in
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah,
discussion.
but I'm wishfully thinking that the recommendations of this committee hold some weight with the rest of council. And so if we were to recommend it to council, they may think, well, okay, they don't want any changes to it. And so I want to incorporate that into the recommendation. So if we do come up with something, it's not going back on our own recommendation.
What is your motion? Include a note that we may offer amendments?
We recommend approval of ordinance 9141 with the possible adjustment of 1D.
I would second. Are you waiting for a second?
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
So, give me a moment to take notes.
And we did add prohibited, right?
We did not.
No, we did not, because it didn't have a second, right?
All in favor of adding that note?
Aye.
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 All in favor of forwarding this to council with that note?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. We have come to
Did
ordinance.
we need that in two separate motions?
I don't know.
I think the message is sent, though.
We have come to ordinance 9142. This is the ordinance creating and adopting Chapter 159 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green concerning exterior property maintenance. Do we have any members of the community who would like to speak on this? Excellent, please come.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Dennis, and I'm speaking this evening for the Bowling Green Save Our Neighborhoods group, BG Song. BG Song is encouraged to read the provisions of the proposed exterior maintenance ordinance, Chapter 159. This ordinance heralds the advent, okay, so it's Christmas, of a future BG where well-cared-for vintage homes command a viewshed along tree-lined streets, complemented by well-placed native landscaping. We can begin to see or imagine dumpsters hidden from view, no longer offering up their unpleasant sight of overfilled containers and overflowing debris as well. BG Song believes attention to the appearance of our city is long overdue. We are hopeful, to quote Bob Dylan, that the times they are a-changin'. Since both the City Council and Mayor Osbacher have now made exterior maintenance of both residential and commercial properties a top priority, we are truly encouraged. With this and other ordinances now being discussed and considered, we as a city may be able to enhance the appeal of our lovely older neighborhoods and develop equally appealing new neighborhoods as well as we continue to grow. BG Song has reviewed the ordinance and tonight would like to provide a few suggestions to strengthen or invigorate the proposed legislation. First, with respect to the language in Section 159.06, Section 3, which reads as follows: removal of miscellaneous rubbish. All yards, courts, or lots shall be free of unsightly refuse, rubbish, which may cause a fire or may act as a breeding place for vermin or insects. First, we question why the final clause is here. Shouldn't the fact that there is refuse or rubbish trigger the requirement that refuse or rubbish be removed? Secondly, the statement should include the words public nuisance. Public nuisance is defined in your added glossary and provides a broader application to rubbish and refuse. For example, the provision could read something like, refuse, rubbish constitute a public nuisance and as such devalue properties and affect the safety and well-being of city residents. Please also consider that lawn materials such as leaf litter, better defined as leaf largesse by the entomologist Doug Tallamy, are actually beneficial to our flower and landscape beds. Indeed, they provide domicile for insects, which are most often essential biota for our neighborhood ecosystems. Therefore, dressing garden beds in the fall with landscape trimmings and leaves should be encouraged and welcomed. Is it possible that the neighbors could vie for the most imaginatively maintained winter garden beds in our modern revised towns? We ask that council please include a statement that defines the use of leaves and plant refuse for the explicit purpose of wintering over landscaping beds, including a statement that these should look tidy and be deliberately structured so as to preserve the plants and critical biome of the garden. Section 159.06B. This section discusses the overall appearance of all buildings, both homes and outbuildings on a property. We would encourage council to strengthen the wording of this section as follows. Windows shall be fully supplied with window glass which is glazed and without open cracks or holes, shall have sashes in good condition which fit within frames, be capable of being easily opened and held in position by hardware, and maintained so as to exclude adverse weather elements from entering the structure. Replacing missing or broken glass with boards will be allowed for a period not to exceed 14 days. We further request language requiring that buildings and windows be washed as needed so as to be visibly clean and well-maintained in appearance. With regards to Section 159.07A, residential and commercial businesses shall maintain foundation plantings where buildings are exposed to public view. BG Song stands behind the inclusion of this provision as it will go a long way to improving the view shed of some of our neighborhoods. We also strongly encourage a statement asking all properties to provide a home for at least one or two, depending on the lot size, canopy trees. Furthermore, a canopy tree removed due to age or considered to be in the way of an addition to an existing structure or new construction must be replaced by a new canopy tree somewhere on the property. Lastly, please consider working on a tree ordinance for the city of Bowling Green. In other parts of this section A reads as follows. All yards, courts, or lots shall be kept free of rubbish not appropriate to the area, which may cause a fire hazard or may act as a breeding place for vermin or insects. Again, we ask, what rubbish is appropriate for any area? Why is the clause limiting rubbish to just being a fire hazard or a breeding area for vermin or insects the trigger for being a violation? BG Song asks that this portion of the ordinance read as follows. All yards, courts, or lots shall be kept free of rubbish, period. BG Song asks that a section E be added to 159.07 to address dumpsters. Dumpsters exposed to public view must be enclosed within a fence with a gate or be screened from view by landscaping. Dumpsters must have a lid that is always closed, and they may not be filled to the point that the lid cannot close. Enclosing or screening dumpsters and requiring that they must close serve public purposes of being more hygienic and ensuring a more presentable view shed. For section 159.09C, which reads, non-compliance with notice whenever the owner, agent, occupant, or operator of a structure or premise fails, neglects, or refuses to comply with any notice of the property maintenance officer, the property maintenance officer may advise the director of law of the circumstances and request him to institute an appropriate legal action to compel compliance. Please strengthen the language to reflect the following. The property maintenance officer shall advise the director of law of the circumstances who shall institute appropriate legal action to compel compliance. Shall should be used rather than may to create covenants, i.e. responsibilities to act. Please also consider using gender-neutral language when referring to any individual within a city position. Lastly, 159.11 regarding penalties. The fines seem quite inconsequential, and stronger monetary punishment could possibly not reach a level that even pinches the coffers of some transgressors. Jail time for shrubbery violations is as absurd as the mere mention of the topic. BG Song would like to suggest that violations of maintenance and landscaping laws and requirements be addressed with community work requirements instead. This would be much more valuable to the community, would serve to have more of an impact on the individual in violation, and may even help build collaboration and cooperation among city members who will be willing to learn the importance of maintaining a beautiful community. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any questions for Hunter?
Can I make a couple of responses to that before
course.
go on to there? So I have a number of responses to all the things you said, but there's only two that I'd like to just bring up without any members of council prompting me, which is first off, regarding gender neutral language, I meant to have gender neutral language in there, and if I missed something, I apologize. So that is something that should be changed. The other thing is regarding the penalties, we can talk more about that in a moment, but those were carefully chosen in a context that, again, we should probably speak more about, but you can't simply impose community service on someone. It just doesn't, the law doesn't work that way. You have to have the threat of jail time, and they have to be found convicted of a crime first. Community service can only be done in lieu of jail time via court order, and if a person doesn't want to do it, they can elect to go to jail if they prefer. So it's, you have to be convicted of a crime first. You can't just impose that cost. And with regards to the fines, we are discussing criminal behavior here. So the fines are all, there's a structure implemented by Ohio law. You can't just say, I choose a fine of $6,000 or $50. It's all structured by Ohio law.
Thank you. I have a number of questions. When we're in definition K, garbage means putrescible animal and vegetable waste resulting from handling, preparation, cooking, consumption of food. I think we all acknowledge that garbage can attract vermin, rats, and insects. However, a number of people compost, and that does include putrescible vegetable waste. My understanding is that proteins and animal byproducts are hazardous for the community health, but vegetable waste is not. Is there a reason we included vegetable waste in this?
I guess the response would be because that's generally what the statutes, I compiled this as a compilation of similar statutes from communities all around the state, and that's the language they use in those. If we don't like the language that's used for this definition of garbage, this whole section is being proposed to serve as an additional tool for the city to use, and we do have. We have other codes both in the city and under Ohio law that allow us to address waste and rubbish and that kind of thing in the yard. So you just kind of use the one that fits your definition when you want to.
Great. Do you feel that the inclusion of vegetable waste here would preclude composting for people that have gardens?
I do not feel that. I think this is more intended for, if someone would just throw it out like they're throwing their garbage out in the lawn or something like that.
Or pumpkins after Halloween?
Sure.
I am concerned about P, public nuisance. Item 3, unsanitary conditions or anything offensive to the senses. So I think most of these definitions are dangerous, including fire hazards, abandoned wells, unsanitary sewage, health department. So these are all unsanitary conditions. I guess why do we have offensive to the senses included instead of just dangerous?
Well, I suppose it would allow for us to address noxious odors if there's a regular stench, that kind of thing. But I could probably understand your objection to it.
Great. Item E. Public nuisances, item 5E. Any premises from which the plumbing, heating, or facilities required by the Wood County Building Code have been removed or from which utilities have been disconnected. So,
I'm sorry, where are you looking right now?
page 2,
Bottom.
P, public nuisance,
Oh, okay. P5E? Yeah,
P5E.
Got it.
So right here, if utilities have been disconnected, that would suggest that someone would be subject to fine if their utilities have been disconnected.
It would only suggest that if there was prohibited action for that in the language itself. This is under the definition, so it's just talking about the fact that someone residing in a place where the utilities have been disconnected could theoretically be considered a public nuisance in anywhere that the language public nuisance is used in the statute. And again, this is the whole idea is to give the city another avenue towards action if something's becoming a problem. So there may be a way that the city can address this stuff alternatively via the health department or otherwise.
That would seem to present a problem to me if someone is financially insecure enough that their utilities get disconnected to then have like public nuisance complaints against them in addition to their financial needs?
I don't know what public nuisance complaint that would yield. I mean, that's clearly not the intention of this legislation, is to declare someone who got their electricity shut off as a public nuisance.
But it says that in the definition.
I mean, yes, I think that's included as a means of adding on, say, you have a home that's, been abandoned or derelict and there's other problems. I think that's included here as another means of taking action for the city. It's not like the city is attempting to take action against people who've had utilities disconnected, and that's the only problem.
Okay.
So would I be correct to assume that public nuisance is defined that way somewhere else in our code?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I don't want to speak for you or your drafting practices, but when I'm drafting legislation, it's very important to be consistent across each ordinance that you are drafting. We can't have public nuisance mean something in chapter 159 and mean something else in chapter 34.
I acknowledge
That would be a mess. So maybe we should change our definition of public nuisance, but that I think is a much larger conversation than this ordinance.
I
Would that
agree.
be a fair assertion?
I would agree.
I think if we were to change the standard from miscellaneous rubbish to public nuisance, then we would be criminalizing essentially poverty, and we would want to take a much closer look at the definition we were using for that. But as this ordinance is drafted now, I don't see anywhere where there's a serious risk of that. I was not looking for it before now, so I could very well be skimming over, discuss it, but.
I guess I also have a question about X. This may be more editorial. It says page 3, item X, rubbish means non-putrescible solid waste consisting of both combustible wastes such as paper, wrappings, tin cans, yard clippings, leaves, wood, glass, crockery, and similar materials. Just the inclusion of both doesn't make sense to me in that context.
I'm sorry, the inclusion of both what? I don't.
Correct. There's a list of things. Both
Consisting-
identifies 2 things.
Consisting of both combustible wastes such as,
Oh, I'm sorry.
think the other both there
You're
would
talking
be-
about the language. Yeah.
I think maybe the both there would be, so combustible waste
Yeah,
and similar
yes,
materials.
you're probably correct. And I believe in an email circulated before this, Bill also pointed out something that my grammar missed as well.
Okay.
There's a lot of words.
Yep.
And to be clear, you're not paid by the word.
I'm not.
So it'd be okay to just take both out. Yeah, okay.
I guess when I'm looking at 159.05, I have some questions about the standards, which we're going to use to determine when something becomes actionable under these. Right, so all surfaces shall be maintained free of broken glass, loose shingles, crumbling stone or brick, peeling paint, or other conditions reflective of deterioration or inadequate maintenance. Those are all conditions that happen fairly regularly. Like when does that become actionable?
I think that's a very good question. in responding to that question, I'd like to respond somewhat as a whole to the email that you sent prior to today. You sent an email previously to myself and some other members of council. Your email, you seem to question the constitutionality of this ordinance as a whole and suggest that you think it's unconstitutional. I take very much exception with that. I would suggest to you that not only do almost every other community I could possibly find have a code almost exactly like this, if not stronger, I couldn't find one that didn't. So, it would be easier probably to list the communities that don't have a code like this than the ones that do, if you can find one. This one specifically, where did I put my paper here? This one specifically was most closely modeled after Perrysburg. They enacted this in 1997. Ottawa Hills has a similar one from 2006, and I can give you the code sections for each of these communities if you'd like to look them up afterwards. Sylvania Township had one in 2002, so townships even have these. Sylvania, Oxford, Ohio, Miami, Ohio. There's case law I have here where not the constitutionality of these ordinances was considered, but different parts of the ordinances themselves. So my assumption is, given the long history of ordinances like this everywhere throughout the state, that I don't think there's any path towards unconstitutionality here.
Thank you.
You seem to make it clear that you feel that it is, and if you have some sort of reference or case law on that, I'd love to hear it. With regards to specifically your question just now about when we take action, I would suggest that every law has discretion built into it. Every law. I mean, that's the whole idea behind probable cause for arrest for most of our criminal law. Someone has to make that determination about when the burden is met for a citation, for an arrest, for anything when you're going forward in the law. Currently, the way we handle things here at the city is we meet once a month and we have a list of all the properties that we've gotten complaints about or we've had issues with in some way, and we discuss what we're doing to address those. Now, as it stands currently, we have the Wood County Health Department, which they do a good job and they are on top of many of the things. And some of what's in here fits into those things, but some of it doesn't. And even if it does, there's a path towards action that the Wood County Health Department takes that can be kind of lengthy. The other route we have is mostly our civil citation system. And again, that's fine, but it's not that encompassing in a lot of places. I have here, we have the report of concern ability through the city's website. So beginning in July, you are allowed to make reports of what you feel are nuisance properties in your neighborhood online. Since July, we've gotten 113 submissions. Now, I feel like that's a lot. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Some of these issues are things that the health department would address eventually, such as peeling paint, that kind of thing. But the whole idea behind this was twofold. A, it's trying to give the city another tool to address these things. And the way I envision it going forward would probably be similar to what we do now, which is we all meet, anyone who has a potential interest in these issues with the city meets, and we discuss each property piece by piece. And if there was a property that this ordinance would allow us to address, we might want to use this ordinance as a tool. Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't, but at least we'd have the ability. And the second part of that is, like I said, every other community I know of that I looked at, I couldn't find one that didn't have an ordinance like this. There's a model code for this that exists out there. Many communities have just said, by the way, we incorporate all this model code, and it's a lot more restrictive than the one I have here is. We could have just said that or not. I'm just saying that this is a very common thing that communities have, and I think it would be a beneficial tool for the city to have. As far as discretion on when taking action, it's not, again, this is not a unilateral decision made. And because we're specifically, if you look at the penalties section, we're talking about criminal penalties, right? And they start at minor misdemeanor. So while it is criminal, it starts at the very, very bottom level. And this is something that a officer would have to cite because you would go to court for that.
Thank you.
Hunter, say this is modeled off of Perrysburg, and I'll forego any Perrysburg jokes and just ask an estimate, ballpark estimate, the percentage of this that has a counterpart in Perrysburg.
A large percentage of it.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because, like I said, there's that model code out there that some communities say, hey, and I can, where did I put my paper? So it's called the International Property Maintenance Code. Sylvania uses that. So does Oxford, Ohio. And they pretty much just have a statute that says we use that code and we reference it, and it updates under Ohio or national law each year. But I felt that one was a little more encompassing than this one. And that one seemed too much almost. But some communities want to do that.
So the reason for my question was, in your research, did you reach out to Perrysburg and see if they had any parts of the code that were problematic or difficult, or they wish they could change, or something for us to keep an eye on?
I did not.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could, though, on that note, while researching this, I did reach out to many communities about how they handle, specifically with regards to the punishment section, because, it is when you're talking about the punishments for stuff like this, it's not a simple thing to say, I want to take someone to court because their grass is too long or they have peeling paint. I was a prosecutor for 10 years, and anytime you're talking about citing someone with a crime or potentially citing someone with an arrestable offense, something to go to jail for, that's a big deal. All the communities I contacted, which includes Perrysburg, Sylvania, Ottawa Hills, they use this stuff very, very sparingly. The idea was just to give us another potential avenue, mostly towards repeat offenders or people who thumb their nose at the city, that kind of thing.
With respect to the balance between stringent legality with no discretion and discretion, with discretion, there's always the possibility of some sort of favoritism or uneven application of the law. In your estimation, Hunter, with the way that we've been doing this and the mechanisms that we have in place, are you confident that there's enough safeguards? For example, meeting and not being a decision by one person but by a group. Do you think that is sufficient to guard against the possibility of uneven application?
Well, I do for a number of reasons. First off, if you look at the way we already do things, such as the thing we discussed earlier, and sorry you weren't here for it, but the issue about citing people for their lawns, under the code, we only have to give a notice every 5 days. We give multiple notices. The issue has always been looking for compliance, not to cite people. And so that goal would remain. And secondly, because you're talking minor misdemeanor, you're talking about criminal penalties, they would have all the procedures and safeguards that due process demands in the criminal justice system anyway.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And we do have a good record over the past of extending grace. Thank you.
I have one more procedural question. This feels like, as I'm reading this, feels like it applies more to our zoning code. Is there a reason this didn't go to planning and zoning?
If you're asking, is there a reason why we're not putting it in that chapter?
Yeah.
Not particularly, other than the fact that we have the new zoning code and it's kind of a monolith I didn't want to break into, and I didn't want to mess anything up there. The whole, like I said, the idea was just kind of give us another avenue towards action if necessary. For what it's worth, all this has gone through the planning and zoning department. They've reviewed all of this, so.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I agree. I was also wondering if it would be beneficial to take the step to have this go to Planning Commission. They have done a great job with what we've tasked them to do with respect to the zoning code, and I think we would benefit from that. So I had a similar thought.
I move that we forward this to Planning and Zoning Commission committee.
Planning,
Does this committee have the ability to forward legislation to the planning commission?
No?
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing that we can do. Proceed.
could council do that, though?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe what we could do is, we as a committee could recommend to council that council refer it to the planning commission.
Excellent. I move that we recommend that to the council.
I second.
All in favor of that recommendation?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No.
All right.
So is that, have we washed our hands with this then? We don't have to?
Or it may come back to us. I mean.
Do you have questions about it?
Well, I mean, we got a list of recommendations here that I think are great recommendations that I feel fully equipped to consider tonight, but I will defer to you guys on that.
I do know from experience that council committees have the right to undo what they did a few minutes earlier. I do think, though, there's safety in a multitude of counselors. The Planning Commission has been very good helping us. And if it turns out that in going through this process, they have one or two nuggets of insight, I would be willing to take the extra time before it's passed to see if they have anything that would further improve this. I am heartened by what the city attorney said about taking it from another city. And if there had been, I'm thinking that if there had been like disasters lurking in the legislation with the other city, that somehow that would have come to light or been changed. So it's not like we're starting something brand new. There's been due diligence. But again, just having another, the Planning Commission take a look at it, I think would be good. There's no downside other than it's going to take a little bit more time.
Thank you. Jeff, what were you had recommendations?
No, we were given a list of recommendations. If we'd prefer to refer it to Planning Commission, we can see what they send back to us and go from there.
I personally would prefer to see it go to Planning and Zoning. I think this has a lot of intersection with.
Are we talking about the Planning Commission or the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee?
Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee.
I do not believe that's the vote we just took. Is that
No,
correct?
that is not. We referred it to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
So I guess my question would be what we did was recommend to City Council that City Council refers it to the Planning Commission. Okay.
I apologize. I misspoke.
But is that what certainly was my intent. Was that your intent, Joel?
No,
Oh,
that was not my intent. So I feel I was mistaken.
I vote no on either of those, so.
if you want to make a motion or
I
to reconsider.
move to reconsider that vote. All in favor of
Boy, there needs to be a second.
I second that.
all in favor of sending it to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
We have to vote on reconsidering.
Vote on reconsidering. All in favor of reconsidering.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
And the only reason is I want to give you another chance. I still wanted it to go to Planning Commission. So my vote to reconsider isn't that I've changed my mind, it's to give you deference to you, because that's what you want to do. So I will make a motion that won't be seconded to refer, to recommend to council that they refer this to the Planning Commission.
I may second that again, but before I do, I feel that this has a lot of intersection with our zoning code. And I would rather see this smoothly integrated into the zoning code than to see it as its own chapter in a separate area.
So are you telling me that all 92 pages of the zoning code are not burned into your memory at this point?
Correct. So,
That being the case, it would be more
Yeah,
prudent.
for what it's worth, if I may, no other communities have this as part of their zoning code. The idea is that this is something different, right? It's not zoning. It's a way for the city to address blight.
Well, these are criminal penalties, right?
Yes.
So it's not, I mean, there are some zoning issues here. Foundation plantings, canopy trees, for example, I think fall squarely.
And the planning director was consulted with this. So yes, it intersects with zoning at certain points, I suppose, only because everything we do does. But I mean, just do as you will. I'm just saying.
thank you.
Yeah, my
I-
rationale's the same, that it'd be good to have another set of eyes, especially a commission that's as accomplished as planning. Have them look at it, and then if they offer any changes or don't, it comes back to council, and then council president can do as he wishes with respect to referring it to a committee or committees.
I am going to change my opinion. So I will not second it this time.
What is the motion? I'm sorry. guys.
There's no motion. Well, the
That's
motion
my
failed.
motion. Well, no, you didn't second it, Jeff could. The motion that I made was that we refer this, or we recommend to city council that council refers this to the planning commission for their input. Deja vu all over again.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I got it
So are
passed
we
for
still?
about 5 minutes.
We're this.
Now
We're
we're
still
going to
considering
vote
this.
on, now we're considering it,
Okay, so
referring it to council with an up or down recommendation.
So I guess before we do that, I would like to propose that we amend the legislation to include the language that was presented to us, be on page 2 of that regarding 15907, adding a section E to address dumpsters exposed to public view.
I would just, sorry to interrupt again. We already addressed dumpsters in different parts of our code, just for what it's worth.
Don't we address all of these things in other parts of our code?
Yes and no. Some, yes. But the dumpsters, okay.
So
Fair enough.
commercial dumpsters, or, because I know we treat the residential, we went through a whole thing. I was not there for that, but I watched fondly from the sidelines. So your opinion, though, is that commercial dumpsters are regulated elsewhere in the same way that's,
Not in the same way, I suppose, but we haven't seen a need for that. That's how I would respond.
okay. So we have not seen any need. Okay. So I guess we will need to talk after this meeting about how commercial dumpsters are regulated and whether that is warranted or not. I will not make any amendment regarding that today. I do like the language changes proposed on the last page. I don't have the language in front of me, but I believe the word may is changed to shall. We're addressing the gender-neutral language as a typo, I believe, to whatever extent it exists in the current.
If I could address the shall thing as well.
Sure.
The words may and shall are typically specifically chosen in the law as they were here. You generally do not want to bind hands in this way that could yield lawsuits, writs of mandamus, that kind of thing. The idea behind this is that you are allowing for discretion and you're allowing for decisions to be made, right? Like if you change that to be shall, then you almost have to take action every time. And yes, in the most pessimistic view of that, it might allow for uneven application of the law, but the more realistic view is that it allows for more discretion and more discretion in applying it and citing someone with a crime every time it's potentially possible.
So with the writ of mandamus, then the concern would be that
Lawsuits all the time.
if the language is changed and we do not act, a citizen would then have a cause of action.
Yes.
Take us to court asking why we are not enforcing the law.
Yes, exactly. The shall and mays are frequent in the law, especially in areas like this, to specifically allow wiggle room so that we aren't getting sued by writs of mandamus left and right.
Anything from you guys? So the last thing then would be the language on Windows 15906B. I like the language written here right up until that 14-day waiting. Window companies right now are running very behind. I don't know of anyone who can get you a new window in 14 days. And if you do, by all means, give me the information because I got a list of clients that are looking for them. That being said, I do think we should put a time limit on the boards over broken glass. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just not sure 14 days is where I would land. So I would make a motion that we recommend all of that language right up until the word replacing. So from Windows shall to the word replacing. Probably I would change Windows shall to Windows must.
Jeff, could you more specifically tell me what section? I seem to have gotten lost.
15906B, and the recommendation is on page 2 of the packet that Rose and Kathleen presented.
So for B specifically, it starts off, what part did you want to change? I'm sorry, Jeff.
This would be added to the end of B, I believe was the intent.
I would,
It'd be on the end of B2.
that's on page 5.
Right.
I am not as comfortable with all of the language. So I'm comfortable with windows shall be fully supplied with window glass, which is glazed and without open cracks or holes. I don't like the next portion of that sentence, but I could pick it up again and maintained so as to exclude adverse weather elements from entering the structure.
So you do not like that the windows should be in good condition, fitting within frames and maintained so as, or capable of being easily opened and held in position? Is that?
Yes. So I think if somebody wants to live in a home where they can't open their windows, that is absolutely their right to do so.
I
be
think
great, but
sometimes
we
people don't want to live in those homes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, but that's, you know,
Okay, well, I think I didn't hear a second on anything, right?
I'm still trying to figure out what the motion is. So
Yeah.
you had mentioned, Jeff, something other than 14 days. Is that part of your,
I would omit that for now. I don't know what a
what the days should be?
acceptable time period would be.
All right, so basically then, if I understand correctly, you're moving to change 159.06B as in beta to add at the end of 2.
I would do a 3. I'd make
Oh, you
it
do it as a
separate
3?
section.
Okay, to add 3.
Fits very neatly there.
Windows shall be fully supplied with window glass, which is glazed and without open cracks or holes, and maintained so as to exclude adverse weather elements from entering the structure. Replacing missing or broken glass with boards will be allowed for a period not to exceed 14 days. Notice that I took that part that Joel didn't want out.
I would second that.
Well, I wanted to make sure this was what Jeff was motioning.
I don't know that that's his motion.
That was not my motion. I was keeping everything right up to replacing.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
So hearing no second. That fails. I will suggest that we create a B3. Windows shall be fully supplied with window glass which is glazed and without open cracks or holes, and maintained so as to exclude adverse weather elements from entering the structure.
Second.
All in favor?
Oh, is there discussion?
Oh, discussion.
And we're not really making the change, we're recommending
We're
to council.
recommending it to council.
Okay, got it. It's been moved and seconded.
All in favor of making this recommendation to council?
Aye.
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 Excellent. Any further recommendations?
Mr. Chair, I guess I will state the obvious, and that is, this is what we are recommending to council.
Yes.
Council, of course, has, if they're wise, they'll do what we recommend, right? But the possibility exists where there could be further changes. And so I would encourage those that have devoted their time and come forward to continue to do that, because this is not the end result. This is just us going to council, and I'm sure they would love to hear from you in their deliberations as well.
Excellent. All in favor of forwarding this to council with our recommendation and our proposed suggestions?
I
All in
second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. With that, I will call our meeting to a close.